I voted my entire life. And then we're on the way home, and this 7-year-old is asking his mother about this democracy stuff. What does it mean? And she says, well, she said, the point about this is we live in a very poor area in Cork in a 2-up, 2-down house with no running water and an outside toilet. But our vote is worth the people living up in Montanari in Cork who are dentists, doctors and lawyers and have a ton of money. So that, you can imagine this 7-year-old. Like if she'd have told me something else, there would have been something else. But that's what she told me. And for the rest of my life, I had this absolutely passionate belief in democracy and what having a vote meant to us as Irish when so many other countries didn't have it. And then my father was a clerk for the railways, so we had free passes on the boat and train. We go to London to visit our relatives who are still under rationing. So we bring 4 suitcases full of sausages, bacon and eggs to our starving relatives in London. And I learned the first thing, interestingly, about homelessness, that the British solved this massive homeless crisis they had after the bombing by the simple expedient of not giving the job to a minister, but giving it to a backbencher with the one task of fixing it. Secondly, by telling the civil service they had to work 7 days a week and not 5 days a week until the problem was solved. And thirdly, by building massive amounts of prefabricated homes. And my relatives were living in a prefab. So, then I'm walking around and I'm agog. See St. Paul's Cathedral towering above all these buildings that have been devastated by the blitz. How did this cathedral survive? Then you walk up to Buckingham Palace and the guardsmen aren't in the red because there's still wartime restrictions and they're actually in wartime khaki. And then on a Sunday morning we go to Hyde Park, to Speaker's Corner. And so all these guys standing up on the boxes talking about down with the Pope and out with the Pope and, you know, in with the Tories and out with Labour and whatever. There's every conceivable opinion. And my old man, who I adored, he said, the great thing he said about what's happening here and what is great about British democracy, he mightn't have used the word democracy to a 7-year-old, but he said, people can say anything here without fear of failure. And again, this 7-year-old suddenly says this is very important. Free speech is very important. So therefore, 48 created huge things for my life. And the rest of my life was in many ways determined by 1948. So, for me to come here and actually say there is a threat to our democracy, I might be pushing it a bit. And yet I believe there is. John F. Kennedy, the great John F. Kennedy said, the freedom is not lost by bomb or bullet. Freedom is lost by the failure of democracy to address its failings. The great Edmund Burke, whose statue stands outside Trinity College Dublin, said, for evil to triumph, all it needs is people of goodwill to do nothing. So therefore, danger for us now, in 2019, is what is happening and how fearful what must we be of it. So, I've been asked to talk about the media. So the words EU, apart from now, are not actually going to cross my lips because you've asked me to talk about the media. And does 21st century media publish fake news? Yes. Does 21st century media deliver stories that are unverified and unproven? Yes. Does modern day media attempt to influence public opinion in their direction? Yes. What are the examples of this? The other thing I have to tell you, is I'm a movie buff, so sort of along the way here we're going to be peppered with a few Hollywood epics just to keep you awake. And the first thing is 1940, black and white movie made right in the middle of the war. There's a movie called Freedom Radio. And it's about, in Germany, developing a radio station that is talking freedom despite the Nazis. And radio has this incredible history, right? Right through World War II, people across occupied Europe are risking death to listen to the BBC. The war ends. Soviet Russia has enslaved half of Europe. And people are tuning in to the BBC because that's the only place they could get the truth. And I remember 1956 for two reasons. Ronnie Delaney won the 1500 meters in Melbourne at a time of 3:41.2, and the Russians invaded Hungary. And I can remember the Hungarians pleading with the West over their radio to come in and help them, as they literally, with bare hands, fought Soviet tanks. So radio has an extraordinary escutcheon. It is a very proud escutcheon and a very proud history. So therefore I am concerned with radio and its illegitimate child television and newspapers, because they all, the media, are failing in their responsibility. I worry. So, obviously, it's well documented my inability to control my tongue on radio, and the old Twitter goes mad, right? And then a senior radio producer in RTE posts a tweet, and he quotes from an event that happened 55 years ago. But it's in my book, to be fair. And in the book, I talked about this 22-year-old Catholic virgin, me, who for the first time in his life met a woman who drank gin and tonic and wore black eyeshadow. And the story was about, you know, having a few gin and tonics with this lady in the hope of, you know, breaking my duck. And then the story ends that I left her apartment as I had entered, a strong Catholic virgin. I thought it was quite funny, right? But if you post a tweet in which you leave out the timeline and you leave out the context, it's actually quite different. And when it comes from a producer in RTE, it's got a lot of validity. So within hours, a member of Dáil Éireann, Deputy Ruth Coppinger, is on the Sean O'Rourke show. Hook, she says, has formed. He plies women with drink to have his way with them. Within days, it's in the national press. Within another couple of days, it's in the Guardian, for God's sake. All right? Hook has gone global. So nobody has checked this story. Sean O'Rourke didn't say to Deputy Coppinger, where'd you get that from? No. Newspaper didn't say, where'd you get that from? Nobody. Just accept it. It's true. So then, the whole furore dies down, so Christmas looks like being okay, right? And then Ingrid, the lovely Ingrid, who I didn't tell her was here today, so anyway, the lovely Ingrid, I come down for breakfast and she says, "You're in the paper again." And there's an article about Hook, right? Well, no, not about Hook. It's an article. And there's a picture of a despoiler of women. Harvey Weinstein. Hashtag #MeToo. Then there's a picture of a despoiler of young boys. Kevin Spacey. Hashtag #MeToo. And there's a picture sandwiched between the two of them of George Hook. Hashtag me too, right? Now, if it wasn't so hurtful to my family and anybody else, and not me, I have to say, I think, you know, it would be funny. And it's funny now when I think about it. And I remember listening to Kevin Miles, and one of the great tragedies about this whole issue of free speech is that we have lost two of the finest journalists of our generation, John Waters and Kevin Miles. It's also a big issue here, which I have to tell you. I prefer if they didn't clap, okay? Because being an extraordinary egotist, I'm likely to go on forever. In fact, when I go into the bathroom in the morning and I turn on the light, I do 20 minutes to the shower curtain. So be careful for what you ask. But anyway, because of the issue of free speech. Right? But the first thing, Myers in the thing said that there were all these stories about him which weren't true. They were all not true. Simply not. You know, I'm listening, and at this point, my crisis hasn't come, and I come on, Kevin, you know. And then, of course, I discovered that's right. All the stuff isn't true that they write about. And I'll give you another movie, and it's called All the President's Men. And it's the story of Woodward and Bernstein and the Watergate issue. And they're played by Robert Redford and Dustin Hoffman. And a huge amount of the movie is actually in the newsroom of the Washington Post. And Woodward and Bernstein, Redford and Hoffman are going to get the stories. They come rushing like, we got a great story here about whoever, right? And then Ben Bradley, who's the managing editor, they're having their morning news meeting. And Bradley says, have we verification? Have we another confirmation of this story? And the boy said, no, it was definitely true. Definitely true. Sorry, go and get confirmation. And then you have this of the two boys, and there's a moment in it where Hoffman's talking to a guy, and the guy confirms it, and he bounces the phone and says, we got the confirmation. Does that exist today? I hesitate to suggest to you it doesn't. There's another movie, Clark Gable and Doris Day, black and white, called Teacher's Pet. And Gable is the editor, an old-fashioned, crusty editor of a newspaper. He thinks the only way you can be a newspaper man is by starting at 14 as a copy boy and working your way up. And Doris Day believes in education as a journalist, but they fall in love with it beside the point. But anyway, there's a young fella in the thing that Gable gives a hard time to, who's a copy boy, and his mum wants him to go to university. But eventually, because Gable loves Doris Day, and who wouldn't love Doris Day, he sends a kid off to university. Now, what has happened today in radio and television and newspaper is all the young people who join it have a minimum of 2 degrees, some of them 3. There's no such thing as somebody coming in at the bottom and learning. Is that wrong? Is it wrong that people do 3rd level education? Absolutely not. But what is being lost is all the fundamental principles that were part of media since time began. So, do they print stuff that's not true? Well, I have to, at some of the points here, I can only refer to my own experience, because I don't know if a story about Joe McDokes is true or not. I don't know. I can only tell about myself. So, the Daily Mail goes bananas with a front page story. It's 35 years old, pretty recent by Daily Mail standards. And it's Hook evicts travellers with savage display of force, right? They are relying on the reflections of a 13-year-old boy. He's now not 13 anymore, obviously, because it's 35 years later, but he was 13 when it happened. Do they check it? No. Do they confirm it? No. Do they verify it? No. A simple phone call to Dunleary Corporation would have said, Hook had nothing to do with it. It just happened to be behind his house. Dún Laoghaire Corporation and the Garda Síochána removed the people because they were in breach of the gambling regulation. But does that matter anymore? No, it doesn't matter anymore. Now you may well say, well, that's fine, George. And the newspaper will say, that's fine if you can. Why don't you sue them for libel? Have you any idea, how much, first of all, how much it costs? Secondly, or as my solicitor said, all you're going to do is you're going to restart this thing all over again. All the pain for everybody in the family, you're going to do it all. And they told Myers exactly the same thing. The cost, and all you do is restart the whole thing all over again. So what do? You just say, to hell with it, and I'm going to get on with my life. But there are worrying trends increasingly that are happening. And if we don't now change them, then I think we're in danger. There's some young people in the room. I have children and I have grandchildren. And all of us at that certain age worry about the kind of world they are going to inhabit. To be honest, I think, I'm less worried about climate change than I am about democracy. Like, I'm going to use a name now, Joseph Goebbels, all right, the greatest propagandist of all time. Goebbels had a great idea. And don't forget, Hitler was elected Chancellor of Germany with less than 30% of the vote. So you don't necessarily, and like we have a government at the moment which is not a majority government, it's in there supported by a callow Fianna Fáil on some kind of supply agreement or something, all right? So, what did Goebbels do? He gave every family in Germany a free radio. So now he knew he could get straight into their kitchen with his particular line of propaganda. The great Noam Chomsky, talking about free speech, he said, Goebbels agreed with free speech as long as it was his free speech. Stalin agreed with free speech as long as it was his free speech. The problem for free speech is, can you agree with free speech if it's free speech by people you despise? Because if you believe in free speech, you must allow them speak. And you don't shut them down. The answer is not to shut them down. The answer is to win the argument. So this government comes into power. What is its first act? Well, you know what I mean. One of its first acts is to create a new information service. We already have the Government Information Service, so we don't need another one. They've got a really good idea. The other one is going to be control the Internet Information Service. So they want the modern day equivalent of a free radio from Goebbels. They've got free entry now, broadband issues apart, into every one of our homes. So what we now have is we have government by Twitter. And they believe that they can control everything. And why did it fail? I think it would have got through because Fianna Fáil was sitting on their hands anyway. Fianna Fáil would have done nothing. The comptroller, Fine Gael had said that this new thing, which really was no problem really, it was only just a bit of information stuff, and it would cost nothing. Unfortunately for them, the comptroller and auditor general said it would cost somewhere between 1 million and 2 million per year. So now, of course, Fianna Fáil get all excited and say, oh, sure, we can't have this, right? And it failed because of 1 million or 2 million, not because of the principle that they were going to control our thinking. And they were. Make no mistake about it, they were going to control our thinking. Let me give you a hypothetical example for a minute, okay? 1940. The Nazis have conquered Western Europe in its entirety. The British Expeditionary Forces existing on the beaches of Dunkirk, and 350,000 soldiers may be lost. And bombs are raining on London from German bombers. You have two choices for Prime Minister. One is he goes on a run every morning and runs 5k. He's lost 2 stone in the last year and a half, and he writes fan mail to Kylie Minogue. Your other alternative is a fella who exists on the diet of champagne for breakfast, drinks whiskey all day, and smokes cigars. The world was saved by the whiskey drinker. Now what do I read about our Taoiseach? I'm sure it's really his last 2 stuff. I'm sure I'm proud. Do I care? You know, do I care he's written to Kylie Minogue? Does it make one whit of difference to the life of any one of the citizens in the country? But it deflects us. It deflects us from the real issue. So let's talk about this government by Twitter. I can't keep my mouth shut. We have, in the Minister for Health, undoubtedly, the worst person in that position in history. So, with people on trolleys, although we didn't know it at the time, with the Children's Hospital spiralling out of control, with women dying of cancer because of bad smear tests, he takes up the case of a young Chinese boy, Bray, whose mother is about to be deported. And on Twitter, I said, well, you should be worrying about the trolleys and not about the Chinese boy. And then in 20 years of sort of public life, I never received more abuse than about that. I was called every name, the great names to shut you down. You got to remember, if anybody attacks you about anything, you know, about the quality of Munster rugby, just say you're racist. Then you can't answer that. So I'm now a racist, I'm a bigot, and I'm a lot of other words. And it's running about 99.9% against me because I'm an awful person. They write to the sponsors of the radio program, they say that they will never use the sponsor's product again. They write to other people I was engaged with on a possible sponsorship deal, and they talk to them about how can you possibly deal with this awful person. It's a pretty bad week. I mean, even thick-skinned as I am, it's a pretty tough week, right? Although, in principle, I thought I was right to question why the Minister for Health was trying to deflect the issue. And it wasn't, okay, the boy was his constituent, but deportation isn't handled by health when I last looked. So, Absence of Malice, a movie with Paul Newman and Sally Ann Field, in that, a newspaper reporter is used by a politician to try and smear this businessman, Paul Newman. His sister, she becomes friends with the sister, and Newman's sister confesses that she had had an abortion. And of course she made a mistake that so many of us have made over our lives. When we're talking to a reporter, we think it's okay. You're not going to write this, are you? And suddenly she realizes, she works in a convent school, that this abortion is going to be in the paper tomorrow. And there's this extraordinary, poignant moment where at dawn she is running down the street where she lives, and she is picking up all the newspapers off her neighbour's front step so they won't read about it. It's incredibly poignant. And she dies by suicide. And of course the point of Absence of Malice is the reporter says, I didn't mean anything, I was just writing a fact. Well, I actually felt like Absence of Malice on Saturday. I've had this week from hell, all this stuff on Twitter. So, obviously my family are a bit, they're a bit tired of the old man getting into trouble. So I go at 7:30 when the local newsagent, true's God, at 7:30 when the newsagent opens his door, I'm dead. So I've got this kind of plan. Will I buy up every newspaper copy in the newsagents so nobody will read about it? Truthfully now, word about it. So anyway, I go in, and first port of call, obviously, it's the indoor, you see. So I grab the indoor, nothing. There's nothing on the indoor. So then I pick up the Sunday Times. And there on the front page of the Sunday Times, albeit below the fold, is a story that the possible deportee, the mother of this Chinese girl, had fraudulently got a passport for her son, the little boy, an Irish passport, by claiming that his father was a fictional Irish person. And probably that was the reason she was going to be deported, but I don't know that, right? But now suddenly Twitter disappears, everybody disappears, because it's not a story anymore, because now there's a backstory. So the only thing was that the Claire Byrne show wanted me on Monday or Tuesday. Obviously, I would have been an interesting target, but I couldn't go because I was genuinely speaking out in Cork, so they were going to fly me out from Cork or drive me out from Cork or whatever. I said, no, I can't do it. So then I watched the programme, recorded it when I come home, and they've got two weeping liberals on board. They've got Kitty Holland of the Irish Times, and they've got Eoin O'Riordan, Senator of the Labour Party, who I'm expecting to be roasted, but not roasted at all, because of course the backstory is still there. And I'm waiting, and I'm waiting, and I'm waiting. What's the elephant in the studio? What's the question that must be asked?
Yep.
Is it asked? No.
It's on TV.
So now, if you're in the audience, if you're watching television, you don't know the single most important thing about this story. Why is television avoided? I don't know. I mean, I have no idea. Did they funk it? Did they make a deal that we won't talk about this? I have no idea. But that was that. Now let's look at the role of the Minister for Health. The Minister for Health was the constituency TD who fought for the young boy. It's a terrible sad story. Young boy's in national school. He's been there with all his mates. He's playing the local Gaelic football team. It's very sad, right? He's an innocent victim of all this, right? And he's taken up by the minister. But the minister then says on radio, he is Irish. He was born in Ireland. He should be allowed to stay. Is he Irish? No, he's not Irish. We, the people, in a referendum, changed the 27th Amendment of the Constitution, in which citizenship was not granted to children of non-citizens. Do you know what the percentage was? 80-20. 80% of us, the people, said we're not granting citizenship. So for the Minister for Health to say he is Irish, unchallenged, she said it on the radio, unchallenged. Now if George said it, exaggeration. If Michael Healy said it, hyperbole. But the Minister for Health cannot say it. A member of the Cabinet cannot say it, because he knows we voted for it. Now the second question is, did he know? Like Frances Fitzgerald lost her job because somebody said, did you read an email? Did you know? Did you know is a key question to ask any minister in Cabinet. Now but did anybody ask him, the Minister for Health, did you know? Now he's sitting there, well, not sitting next to him, but he's sitting cheek by jowl with the Minister for Defence, or the Minister for Justice, who's handling deportation. Is it conceivable that he can say, hey, Charlie, what's going on here? And that Charlie can say, well, listen, actually, there's a bit of backstory here. Is that conceivable? I don't know. I'm not making any arguments. I don't know. But am I entitled to know? That's the key question. Are we, the people, entitled to know? Are we entitled, because we own the radio and television station. We don't own the Irish Times. They can do whatever they like. But we own the radio and television. It's our money. It's our taxes. It's our license. We're entitled to ask. Did they ask? No. Now, to quote Deputy Coppinger, the minister has form. We know that there was an attempt to have him removed, a vote of confidence in Dáil, and he was kept there by the vote of Fianna Fáil sitting on their hands, because he told, if he didn't tell Porky Pie, he certainly played around with the truth in relation to the Children's Hospital. Would he have survived in any other government since W.T. Cosgrave in 1922? No. But now he survives. And I find that worrying. Worrying in the extreme. That we have a government that would attempt to put together a propaganda outfit, because there is no other word to describe it. That we have a media that will publish without checking. And that we have a media that will not ask a question if the question happens to be difficult. So, where are we today? Well, I don't know about you, but I think I was the only media person who said Trump was going to win. Does that? No. You like Trump? It's a bit like saying, I think Manchester City are going to win the Premiership. That doesn't mean I support Manchester City. It's just a fact. Now, why did I think he was going to win? Now, why did, if you listened to your radio and read your newspaper, would you have thought Hillary was going to win? Well, two reasons. They only went, and if you look at the map, the electoral map of America, it's been unchanged since Roosevelt. The two wings, the two coastal wings, vote Democrat, the centre votes Republican, in principle, right? So where did the Irish Times or the RTE go for their information? We're reporting from Washington, D.C. We're reporting from Boston, Massachusetts. We're reporting from New York City. Did they go to the people in houses in Detroit, the value of whom is now measured in hundreds rather than thousands? Did they go to the deserted steel towns of Pennsylvania? Did they go to Dubuque, Iowa, Lawrence, Kansas, Independence, Missouri? In a pig's eye, did they? So they had no idea what the bulk of the American people were thinking. The Democrats, on the other hand, put up the only candidate they could lose. The only candidate. They could have put up Bernie Sanders, Nancy Pelosi. They could have put up anybody. And they probably would have put up Hillary. Who's the only person who could lose. There are roughly 150 million in America, women, and Hillary probably tops the list. That's the most hated. In America, because there's another mistake here. We think that the Americans voted Trump as President of Ireland. They didn't. They voted Trump as President of America. And I don't care who the hell they voted for, he's their president, he's not our president. Now, we criticize Trump every single day. Imagine if the New York Times started criticizing Michael D. or Taoiseach Varadkar, we'd be up in arms. How dare they? These are our people. We elected them. And yet we think it's okay. So therefore, what we also can't do is we can't differentiate, media-wise, between the man and the office. The President of the United States has done an extraordinary job economically. All the economic numbers in America are better now than they were under Obama. On the other hand, Sunday Times, 2 weeks ago, spent 3 pages telling us he cheats at golf. Do I care? I don't give a fuck. So therefore, the danger here is, there's a great phrase in Gaelic football from my Cork days, and it was called, "Don't play the man, play the ball." And that is currently what is happening. That media is broadcasting, writing what they believe without a contrary view. And it's impossible to have any discourse without a contrary view. For example, I certainly believed, almost since the election, that Putin won the election for Trump. I absolutely believed it. Every single day, the Russians were involved, and Trump was involved, his son was involved, his nephew was involved, they're all involved with the Russians. And I believed it, because it said it in the paper. And then, wait on the Mueller reports. Wait on the Mueller reports, now we have it. Mueller reports? No. So now, they're worried about him cheating at golf because they can't get him on the Russians without him. Do I support it? Do I think Trump's a great guy? No, I don't. Do I like him? No, I don't. Is he preferable to Hillary? Absolutely. But I don't have the right to tell the Americans who they should have. Now, is our media fair? Because this is an important criteria. Our media must be fair. And our media must ask the questions that have to be asked. Popular or not, easy or not, you have to ask them. So let's look at our presidential election. It's a shoo-in. Michael D's going to skate home, so Michael D doesn't bother campaigning or doesn't bother going on television. He's going to skate home. And all the other fellas haven't got 1% between them. And then one guy starts talking about travellers. He's a racist, and he starts talking about travellers, and he wins 342,717 votes in the presidential election, which is roughly 20%. He went from 0 to 20 in a fortnight. Staggering performance. Is he a racist? I don't know. But clearly, there are 342,717 other racists. And if you extrapolate that to the population as a whole, there's about 750,000 racists based on that. Okay? So, now, the one television program which has a wonderful escutcheon for handling difficult issues, The Late Late Show. We can remember condoms, we can remember Bishop Casey, we can remember all those stories. So Casey goes on The Late Late. And Casey is assassinated on The Late Late. The presenter doesn't ask him one single question. The audience is rigged, and he's annihilated. Now, is he very good on television? No. But I remember watching it and thinking, you know, my hero Winston Churchill wouldn't have got out of this. There's no way he can get out of this because it's rigged. Now, in my view, the producer should have resigned. In actual fact, I think the Director General should have resigned because the program was so wrong in terms of what we believe our media should deliver for us. Where in that studio was a representative of the 342,717? There was no representative of them. It was only a representative of the other side. Now, I have no truck with either side. It doesn't matter to me. I must admit I've met Casey twice. But, like, it doesn't matter. But fairness demands that we have it. So if our radio, television, and newspapers can only give us one side of the story, and where are we? Then it is deeply worrying for us. Now Kennedy, John F. Kennedy, once said, he said, freedom is not lost by bomb or bullet. Freedom is lost by a failure to attack, to handle attacks on democracy. And I think that's what's happening. We're actually afraid, because who today would take a job on radio, television, or newspaper and tackle the unpopular story? Who would dare to? If I was 30 years of age today and I was trying to create a career for myself, would I turn around and say, you know what I'm going to do? There's about 6 stories out here. We really have to talk about them. Am I going to do it? Am I going to risk the Twitterati having a field day against me? I'm not. No, I'm not. And would I have empathy and sympathy for that 30-year-old person? I absolutely would. So what are we creating? We are creating people in media who are afraid. Who speaks out? Like, there was a great phrase about homosexuality, and the phrase was, the love that dare not speak its name. Now, homosexuality, like, it's okay now, you can speak about that, but you can't speak about a whole pile of other things. Like just 2 weeks ago, a woman of a transgender child complained to the police that another lady had not referred to her transgender child by the appropriate pronoun. Okay? She was interviewed, firstly by the police, on a possible charge, it didn't happen, it was nonsense, on a possible charge of incitement to hatred. So what we have is a really, really serious situation. We have a situation in which people are afraid to speak. I actually thought that only happened in totalitarian regimes. I really only thought that. You know, that the Hitler Youth were going to be spying on my granny, was she listening to the radio? Now, what can I say? What can I do? And that applies to all of us. So what happens if none of us speak? What happens if there is no alternative view? If the only view is the accepted view of what might be described as the liberal left or whatever it's called. I don't know what it's called. But whatever it's called, it's saying there's only one message. It's our message. And if you step outside that message, we don't want to hear it. So, I'm here because the right to be here is important. It's not what I say, or it's not what I do. It's that I have the right to be here. And I will do that every single time as long as there is breath left in my body. Thank you very much.